To the Point with Congressman Bill Pascrell, focusing on the concerns and issues facing the families of New Jersey's 9th Congressional District.
Hello, I'm Bill Pascrell. I'd like to welcome you to this latest edition of To the Point. This past December, the entire world was shocked and saddened to learn of the tragic shooting in Newton, Connecticut, which took the lives of 20 innocent children, 6 staff members of Sandy Hook Elementary School. President Obama has laid out a plan that identifies common sense steps we can take right now to better protect our children and our communities from tragic mass shootings like those in Newton, Aurora, Oak Creek, Tucson. The list is long. While these mass shootings have sparked a national conversation about violence in our country, everyday gun violence continues to plague our communities. With me today are 2 people on the front lines of this debate to discuss how we can prevent another large-scale act of violence, as well as reduce the daily tragedies that gun violence inflicts on our communities. Congresswoman Carolyn McCarthy is the U.S. Representative from New York's 4th Congressional District, one of the nation's most vocal gun control advocates. And in 1993, her husband Dennis killed and her son Kevin severely injured on a Long Island Railroad commuter train when a gunman opened fire on passengers. John Lowy is the Legal Action Project Director of the Brady Center to prevent gun violence and leads the nation's leading public interest law program devoted to using the courts to reduce gun violence. Thank you both for being here today on To the Point. Carolyn, and we're so happy to have you here too.
Well, thanks, Bill, for doing this. It's so important to get the message out that there are things that can be done.
John,
thanks, Bill.
And thank you for doing this. I got into a lot of trouble when I was in the New Jersey Assembly when I co-sponsored the ban on assault weapons. A number of them, not all of them, but a number of them that we felt should have been. So we've been over the hump. We've been through the firestorm. Right. And Carolyn, if it wasn't for you, I believe we wouldn't even be talking about this. And I know what happened in this great tragedy in Connecticut, but you have been there, you've been steadfast, and you and I believe deeply in the Second Amendment. You and I believe deeply that we don't want to take weapons away from people, the great majority of people who have them and in their possession and have them legally. But go ahead.
I was just going to say, Bill, I mean, obviously we've been you and I have been fighting this, all of us have been fighting this for the 17 years that we're here in Congress, and even before that.
Together.
Even before that.
Yes.
I certainly worked with President Clinton at that time, was not in Congress, to get the assault weapons bill passed. And here we are facing a great divide, in my opinion.
Yes.
Yesterday in the Senate, Senator Feinstein's bill, the assault weapons bill, which had the large magazines in it, was not accepted into the larger package. So she'll still offer it as an amendment, but it's not a good feeling, unfortunately.
Yeah. What do you feel about that, John?
Well, I was thinking that we've all been in this for a long time. Columbine was a wake-up call to this country. Since Columbine, there have been 1.4 million Americans who've been shot. Yeah. And that is an outrage that we have not dealt with this problem. And obviously assault weapons were used there and have been used in many of these mass shootings. They have no place in civilian hands. And there is, just the other day, the Washington Post had a poll, a majority of Americans support an assault weapons ban. So hopefully it will be supported by Congress. I mean, hopefully this is a case where Congress will support the views of the American people.
You have to have the courage to do that. Yes. You have to have guts on certain issues, and this is a big issue. And I don't believe that those gun advocates really believe that we're not after taking their guns away. They think that this is a slippery slope, whether we're talking about checking your ID, who you are before you buy a gun, et cetera, et cetera. So many guns are bought in the parking lots, whether it's the magazines, the number of bullets at one time, or whether it's assault weapons in and of themselves. It's a lot of things. It's a lot of things.
But you know, Bill, let's go back to when the original assault weapons bill was put in place, and making large magazines only have a certain amount of clips.
Right.
That wasn't taking anybody's right to own a gun away. So it's already been proven. And over the years, we saw the gangs could not get these particular guns. We saw the gangs couldn't get the large magazines, so you didn't see them on the streets.
Well, now they can.
Now they can get them almost anywhere. Certainly in our states.
Which brings up another point. I read recently that former district attorney Robert Morgenthau. His idea is very interesting. While he thinks we need some other legislation, he said very emphatically that we're not implementing laws that are already on the books, and particularly he focused in on gun trafficking. The federal government has slackened off, whether they don't have the resources or not. I mean, we think we're providing them with the resources, maybe we're not. But the number of arrests and the number of inquiries about the trafficking of these weapons from state to state, and we know the story.
Right.
I'm not going to rehash them. The number of confiscations are down. The number of arrests are down. Why can't we even implement the laws that are already on the book?
Well,
John, this is your bag. This is the laws. It's easy to pass laws sometimes. If they're not implemented, what the heck good are they?
Well, I mean, first of all, we should enforce the laws more effectively. That's not a reason not to close the loopholes in existing laws, which would make the current laws even more effective.
Why aren't we implementing the laws already on the book? In fact, most people don't even know what the laws are on the book. I would say to you that most congressmen don't know what laws are on the book.
Well, the gun lobby has made it more difficult to enforce the laws. I mean, one thing that they've done is prevented us from getting an ATF director, which would lead an enforcement
5 years?
effort.
How many years?
I thought it was 6 to 7 years.
That's right. Yes.
What's their big? I mean, here's the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, ATF.
They've also given immunity to some sorts of immunity to corrupt gun dealers. We have gun dealers. We have a case with a young man who was shot in Buffalo with guns that were trafficked from Ohio. A gun dealer that sold 87 handguns in a single purchase. It's a licensed gun dealer, all cash. Nothing happened to that gun dealer. And in fact, there's a federal law which gave the gun dealer an argument for why he should be immune from even negligence liability. Fortunately, we were
insanity.
able, and that needs to be corrected.
And these weapons wind up on our streets. I mean, I live in the third largest city in New Jersey, Paterson. You live right in the heart of God's country, Long Island. But I mean, we see shootings every day. I mean, they may not be mass shootings, thank God they're not, but there's still people dying, people getting hurt. We don't seem to have the energy or the urgency to get this done. Well, am I wrong? Am I right?
No, you're right, Bill. But I'd like to go back a little bit. When I had an argument with LaPierre, the head of the NRA,
lovely guy,
and we were talking about this, and he says, "Well, you just passed a lot of money to give to the ATF." This going back a couple of years ago to ATF, and I said, "No. I said, you look at that legislation. The money was not slated for the ATF to be able to go after these gun dealers and everything. It went to the border control.
Right.
Now, yes, we need border security. There's no two ways about it.
And you and I have always supported that.
And we have supported that.
Right.
But I mean, you have to have enough money for everybody to be able to do their job. Take a look at New York City. They've done a great job because they got money through Homeland Security.
That's right.
But you know what? It's not the problem of New York. It's the guns coming into New York, open up the back of someone's trunk, and all these young people, gang members, everybody else goes and buys the guns.
You mentioned New Jersey. We represented 2 New Jersey police officers who were shot. One of them was almost killed with guns that were trafficked from West Virginia.
Well, this has been one of my motivations. I'm glad you brought it up, John. The people who perpetrate, they have more guns and are better equipped with killing devices than the police officers. Why do we want a social situation where those who protect the law are not, we don't give them the adequate, and yet we have people throughout the society who have these assault weapons, and they have bought them legitimately, many of them, some have not. But the point of the matter is, why do you need that kind of firepower out there? Why do you need an assault weapon as a hunter? Now look, I believe that if somebody wants to collect weapons legally, I have no problems with that.
Right.
But we're talking about assault weapons that are taken into the street, that are used at the gun practicing, where you're trying to shoot off a certain amount of ammunition. But our police officers are put at a great disadvantage. We do not protect our police officers throughout the United States of America. I will contend that. You know, Carolyn, I'm very close to police and firefighters, first responders. We do not. We give them lip service.
But Bill, that brings us to another issue: the comprehensive background checks. You know, the bill that's in the Senate and the House bill that I'm sponsoring would cut back on people from not being able to buy these guns.
That's correct.
You know, we call it the gun show loophole. We would close all of those loopholes.
Right.
I mean, that's something that needs to be done, and hopefully we'll be allowed to have a vote here.
I understand that the gun manufacturers support this really, but they're afraid to speak up because
some of them came out 2 weeks ago to say that they are supporting a gun.
But why wouldn't you? What's LaPierre's
He's not
big argument?
He's not speaking for the majority of gun owners.
Not in my district. The NRA people in my district believe that that's a legitimate and a reasonable request to have everybody register when they purchase a weapon.
I mean, polls have shown that. In fact, I saw this Washington Post poll the other day. 93% of gun-owning households support requiring background checks at all gun sales. That's higher than non-gun-owning households, as a matter of fact. I mean, they get it. Most gun owners are responsible people. I mean, Wayne LaPierre and the NRA leadership are speaking for a tiny fraction of gun owners, and even a tiny fraction of NRA members.
Yeah, we can't. I guess we haven't been fortunate enough to sit down and with Mr. LaPierre and talk about where we could come to some common agreements. I mean, this guy's he's headstrong. The organization is therefore headstrong about not going and touching any of this because they feel that it's the slippery slope, and this will bring us to giving up our weapons.
Bill, we have met with the NRA. We have met with them several times with our task force that we put together here.
But they're resolute in this. They're not going to change.
Well, yeah, but when we sat down and talked to them, they were kind of leading us on to the point of where, the background checks, we could probably work with you. And then 2 days later, LaPierre comes out and says, absolutely not, absolutely not. So, I mean, when you have all the groups that are out there basically putting out, I'm sure you've read the comments from, if there's an article about you or me on the gun issues, the comments that are out there are, certainly way out of the ballpark.
Well, we can handle that.
We can handle that. I mean, you got to have tough skin. But with that being said, most NRA members did not even know that the majority of people did not go through a background check.
We're going to take a moment's break. We'll be right back. And I want to thank you again, John. I want to thank you, Carolyn. We're going to be back in a few moments, and then we'll do the rest of this show. But thanks again. I really appreciate it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We have Carolyn McCarthy, and we have our good friend John Lowy from the Law Center. You've been doing a lot of work on guns and what. I want you to listen to something first. It sobered me up when I read this. Mike Lupick is a great writer for the Daily News. I really like him. I enjoy him, and he's substantial. He's a person of substance. He wrote this going back over. He was examining the life of the creep who killed all of those kids and those teachers. We were all told in a room of first responders in Newton who have since quit their jobs. So shattered were they by what they found when they got to the school that morning, when they saw dead teachers with their arms wrapped around the children they had tried in vain to save. Here's a guy had a spreadsheet how he's going to do this. He planned this. These first responders arrive on the scene. They see this thing. I mean, you can't get that out of your mind. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I've given.
You went through this.
I went through this, so I know what a body looks like that's been shot, and to imagine, some of those children were shot 11, times. There was not too much left of those bodies, and I think if people could just stop and visualize what these young children went through, I think that they could understand the disaster of what a gun can do, and. Yes, he was obviously mentally ill, but he was still able to get his hand on his mother's gun that should have been locked away because she knew her son was not well.
Right.
And yet she took him to a shooting range instead of getting the help. And there was not an issue here of finances as far as trying to get him help, but it was the easy access of getting the gun. And if people think about this, really think about this, those children, and only one mother did have an open coffin because she wanted to see what happened to her son.
Yep.
And just imagine that.
The bravery.
But this goes on every day.
I know.
And there was no reason for Mrs. Lanza to have this Bushmaster AR-15 in these high-capacity magazines.
She was an enabler.
I mean, if she wanted guns to protect herself, there's conventional handguns that could have been used.
Look, we
that
don't
would
know
not
what
have been able to.
No question. We don't know what our
enable
kids are doing half the time, but we do have a sense of their character. We would be shocked at certain things. That's not my kid, and we wouldn't be shocked at other things perhaps that came up. But she enabled him. She was buying him weapons. She didn't understand the fixation he had on weapons. I mean, there's weapons.
I'd say we all enabled.
And then there's fixation of weapons.
We all enabled him because we, as a society, allowed these military-style weapons and high-capacity magazines to be sold to civilians who have absolutely no reason to possess them. These are useful for mass assaults on people, like Adam Lanza committed, or like are needed in the battlefield. They have no use in civilian homes.
Right.
And the fact is that there are any number of conventional firearms that are the most effective weapons for self-defense, which can be possessed legally under any of the assault weapon proposals that we have.
There's no such a thing as an absolute right, and I understand their Constitution very, very, very well. I want to read you something. The Supreme Court struck down Washington, D.C.'s handgun ban, remember that, as part of its decision in the District of Columbia versus Heller. I don't know if you remember that decision. I do.
I do.
It affirmed that the rights afforded by the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution are not unlimited, are not absolute. This is an excerpt of the opinion written by Justice Scalia. Quote, although we do not undertake an exhaustive historical analysis today of the full scope of the Second Amendment, nothing, in our opinion, should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places, schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms, unquote. So you can't yell fire in a theater. It's not an absolute right, free speech. There's not an absolute right to own a gun. That's baloney. That there's nowhere in the Constitution. And when you have the most conservative member of the Supreme Court saying, I mean, I read it word for word. I didn't leave any comma out or anything like this. How do you explain these characters who are out there who are pounding their chests and saying, we must defend America?
Yeah, but that's the propaganda that's out there, Bill. I mean, believe me, the NRA has an awful lot of lawyers. They know that what we're trying to do is constitutional and would be held up constitutionally. What they're trying to do is, again, reach that small portion. You know, you understand that people buying guns has actually gone down, but you have a smaller portion that are actually buying more guns.
That's correct.
And these are people that don't believe, in my opinion, they say they believe in the Constitution. I don't believe that they do actually believe in the Constitution.
This decision did a couple of very important things that are very helpful. Because one, the court said that there is an individual right of law-abiding citizens to have a gun in the home. So there is no slippery slope anymore.
Right.
The government cannot
accept
take
that.
away all the
Law of the
guns.
land.
So
Yep.
Law of the land.
at the same time, as you said, the court said reasonable gun laws, like bans on felons and the dangerously mentally ill, and on certain dangerous, particularly dangerous weapons,
Right.
are constitutional. I mean, I heard
And we can have debate about which of those weapons are the most dangerous. We can have a debate about that. I mean, New Jersey changed. When we were doing that law, I remember whether this weapon should be included or that weapon, and very few of us were weapons experts. We relied on the expertise of other people. So you could debate that.
You can ban
That's
certain
on put it
types.
on the table,
Yes.
and we'll probably shrink the number that are banned. But I think we have the right to do this to protect the population.
No question about it.
think
And the
we have an
Supreme Court,
obligation.
Justice Scalia said you could.
And by the way, that's why I want to bring in the large magazines, because obviously if we cut down how many bullets are in a magazine,
Right.
then we're also saving lives right there. What happened to my husband and to other commuters on the Long Island Railroad, it was when three gentlemen tackled Colin Ferguson, who was the
Right.
shooter, when he went to go change the clip, the magazine. Same thing happened with our colleague Gabby Giffords. So the less bullets that are in a magazine, the better chance people have on taking that person down.
But you know what? Each of these situations was planned. And this is not anti-NRA or any other gun advocacy group. We've got to get that. The more we say it eyeball to eyeball, it's easy for me to say it, they're not here. But the more we say it eyeball to eyeball, we get the word out there. This has nothing to do with the NRA. They just have been an impediment for us passing certain laws that we think will minimize gun violence. But the NRA has done everything they possibly can to stop any legislation.
Which they have, Bill.
But they've also said that, look, what about the laws we have on the books already? I think they're right in that regard. We have not implemented the laws that are already on the book. It's an excuse, I know, but they're right on it.
Well, it's an excuse, but the NRA has also made it more difficult to enforce the laws in the books. And they've done everything they can to roll back the laws. So they really don't want the laws enforced.
Do you think most Americans know that there is no director of the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division?
No,
Do you see, for 6 or 7 years to go by without us being able to replace? That is insane. That's like the dark side. I said that jokingly.
Bill,
wants no consumer protection agency.
But Bill, you know also the long arm of the NRA and the fear that they have put into senators and members of
They don't
Congress.
put it in me.
So
they certainly don't put it in you.
well, yeah, but when you think about it, though, why hasn't there been a director
Because
confirmed?
we're always looking at the next election.
Well, it's not
Democrats
only that.
are looking at the next election for some reason. Republicans look at the next elections for other reasons, and we never get anything done.
But that's changing. Newtown has made a difference.
I hope you're right.
No, Newtown has made a difference. We'll hopefully win something through this Congress. And I pray to God that we do. But down in the long run, as we educate people, that laws can be put in place to make our society safer. Now, we cannot save every single life. You know that.
Right.
I spent my life as a nurse. We worked very hard at that, but we couldn't save every patient. It will be the same with this, but we can cut down the slaughter and the amount of money that has been spent for those that survive.
And
Every other country has done it.
Well, not every country, but
most countries. Every other industrialized country. I mean, we have the same level of crime, the same level of violence as other industrialized countries. Our gun homicide rate is 20 times higher than 22 other high-income populous nations combined. Combined. I mean, that we are basically, for 80% of gun deaths or gun homicides among industrialized world take place in the United States. Basically, we have almost a monopoly on gun homicides.
Yeah, I was at last month I was at a meeting in Bergen County, which that part of the district, part of my district, on gun violence. It was on a Sunday afternoon in Teaneck. And there were about 4 or 5 gun advocates in the room representing different groups. A nice turnout. The room was pretty crowded. I couldn't believe, though, the fervor in some of them in attacking. And I said, you know, we're never going to get to the promised land with this kind of thing. I see kids in my town of Paterson, New Jersey, dying in 12, 13, 14, 15 years of age. Yeah. I mean, I see this every day. Maybe 15 are getting killed at the same time, but they're 1 or 2 are dying every other day. I mean, if I sit back and I don't do anything, I believe I should be replaced, period. And what scares me is that law enforcement bigwigs, attorney generals, U.S. attorneys, I feel, do not take this on as a major priority.
But there's legislation in the gun trafficking law that basically would have the penalties for someone that falsely buys a gun, so that would put teeth into it. You know, right now, most of our states and attorney generals,
right,
and certainly you can speak to this even better, they might throw a year on, which is usually kind of bargained out, you know, for it to get more information.
We unfortunately have come to the end of the show. I wish we had another hour with both of you. John, I really appreciate your efforts, and God bless you for what you're trying to do. And Carolyn, you are our inspiration. So you cannot, in any manner, shape, or form, back off, and you never have.
Oh, I'm not going to back off.
And you know, you're around to calm me down, and you do a good job at that. I'm very proud of you, and I'm very proud of you, John.
Thank
you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for your great work.
Thanks for watching the edition of To the Point. You've heard our thoughts. Now I'd like to hear what you think about today's show. If you have any comments, concerns, questions, stay tuned. Our address, phone number, and website address will appear in a moment. Thanks again for tuning in. See you the next time on To the Point.